On the day of the ghost marriage, my sister shoved me aside and climbed into the coffin first. When I saw her cradle the stiff, reeking corpse and kiss it frantically, I knew. My sister had been reborn too. In my past life, the ghost marriage awakened my spiritual sight, allowing me to communicate with the worlds of the living and the dead. I solved people's problems and became a revered wish granter, enjoying a life of luxury and respect. But she never knew I was naturally gifted, and my powers were simply destined to awaken when I came of age. The ghost marriage was just a cover. The real purpose was for the bride to take on a curse. My foolish sister, you have no idea that your life is about to be even more miserable than the last. I'm the one whose birth chart is a perfect match for Jason Miller. I'm supposed to be his spirit bride. I'm marrying him, I am. My sister, Chloe, looking like she'd been through hell, burst through the doors of the Miller family's ancestral hall. She yanked me out of the coffin, pushed me to the ground, and went into a frenzy. A sharp pain shot up from my tailbone, snapping me back to reality. As I looked around at the familiar yet strange scene in the hall, I realized what was happening. Before I could even process it, Chloe ripped the red bridal veil from my head, scrambled into Jason Miller's coffin, and started kissing his corpse indiscriminately. My love, she cooed, I'm your perfect match. I stared in shock at Chloe's triumphant, joyous face and understood. She had been reborn too. Chloe's astrological charts really were a perfect match for Jason Miller's. In our past life, after Jason's sudden death, the Miller family offered a fortune for a spirit bride. Any woman whose birth chart was compatible would receive 1,000 pieces of silver after the ceremony. But when the fortune teller declared that Chloe and Jason were a match made in heaven, she refused. Marry a dead man? My life will be ruined. Still, she couldn't stand to see all that money slip away. She hatched a plan, drugged me on the day of the wedding, put me in the red dress, and had me delivered into Jason Miller's coffin. After the ghost marriage, however, my spiritual sight opened, giving me the ability to communicate with the dead. Not only did I get to enjoy the Miller family's vast fortune, but I also became a respected wish granter. Chloe took the silver and lived a life of wild extravagance for a while. Once she got a taste of the good life, she chose to become a rich man's mistress. But she was never favored and didn't see a dime. In fact, she was treated worse than a servant. Our lives became a classic case of two sisters ending up worlds apart. In her last life, she credited all my good fortune to her identity as the spirit bride, convinced I had stolen her destiny. Twisted by jealousy, she stabbed me dozens of times in my sleep, venting her rage until I was dead. Ava, I can't believe you'd secretly swap our birth charts to marry Jason Miller in my place. Chloe glared at me, her eyes filled with a murderous rage. We're sisters. How could you be so vicious? The Miller ancestral hall buzzed with the whispers and murmurs of the guests. Bang! Mr. Miller, seated at the head table, slammed his hand on the wood. Enough of this nonsense. Which one of you is the true spirit bride with the matching chart? Before Chloe could speak, the fortune teller in his Taoist robes hurried out from the crowd. Sir, it's this young lady. I read her charts myself that day. The fortune teller pointed at Chloe, studying her face. I'm absolutely certain. I could never forget. Hearing this, Chloe shot me a smug smirk, a victorious little lift of her chin. This was more than I could have ever hoped for. You see, the spirit bride was actually just a scapegoat Mr. Miller had found to absorb misfortune. Once the ghost marriage was complete, unless the bride was formally divorced, she would be cursed to carry the Miller family's bad luck for the rest of her life. In my last life, although I became a respected wish granter through my own abilities, only I knew the truth behind the glamorous facade. My life was sustained by a constant diet of expensive tonics and medicines. My body was already wrecked. Worst of all, to ensure I'd remain a widow in the Miller household forever, Mr. Miller had hired someone to destroy my womb. A brutal procedure performed twice daily, making it impossible for me to ever have children. Chloe, oh Chloe, this time it's your turn to taste that living hell. I glanced coolly at the self-satisfied woman in the coffin. Well then, congratulations on your wedding. I hope you enjoy your life of suffering. The auspicious time for the ghost marriage was midnight. To avoid any delays, Once the true bride was confirmed, Mr. Miller hastily ordered the coffin to be sealed. The black, solid wood coffin had been custom made by a master craftsman. It was just large enough for 2 people, and once sealed, its special construction allowed the living person inside to breathe. But the marriage ritual required a full day and night, meaning Chloe would have to spend 24 hours in the coffin with that dead body. Then again, considering how she was just hugging and kissing the corpse, that probably wasn't a big deal for her. There was one more crucial element for the ghost marriage to succeed. A blood relative of the bride had to stay by the coffin and burn incense. Naturally, that lovely job fell to me, but I was happy to do it. Besides, the Millers had promised me the silver once Chloe and Jason's marriage was official. And as it happened, the day of the ghost marriage was also my coming-of-age birthday. My spiritual sight was slowly beginning to awaken. However, on the second night of the ritual, something strange happened. Faint moans of a woman began to seep out from the coffin. The sounds were unmistakable, like a man and woman, in the middle of things. It wasn't just me. The Miller family servants keeping watch with me all pricked up their ears, their brows furrowed. In my past life, Chloe had knocked me out and put me in the coffin. By the time I woke up, the marriage was already complete, and I had no memory of my time inside. But I am certain that no one touched me during that time. To become a wish-granter, to be revered and receive offerings, one must be a virgin. Yet the voice from the coffin was definitely Chloe's. Unfortunately, with the coffin sealed, I couldn't use my sight to see what was happening inside. Quick! Go get the master! A maid with her ear pressed against the coffin lid waved frantically. A few moments later, Mr. Miller, leaning on his cane, rushed into the hall with the fortune teller. When Mr. Miller heard the sounds from within, his face turned livid. Open it! I want to see who dares to carry on with someone else right under my nose. The fortune teller, however, looked delighted. He did a quick calculation with his fingers and hurried to stop Mr. Miller. Sir, this is a good thing. It seems the ghost marriage is not only a success, but your son is also bringing you a grandson. Mr. Miller froze, his face a mask of disbelief, but his eyes shone with an undeniable glint of excitement. Really? Jason was Mr. Miller's only son. That he died so young without leaving an heir was Mr. Miller's greatest regret. Deep down, he desperately wanted the Miller line to continue. The fortune teller clapped his hands together. Absolutely. And don't forget, sir, this coffin was made for a ghost marriage. Once it's sealed, it cannot be opened casually. Besides, he added, the hall is full of people keeping watch. Even someone with extraordinary powers couldn't have gotten in. A faint smile appeared on Mr. Miller's lips. Did any of you see anyone else approach the coffin? Everyone frowned and shook their heads. Good. Excellent. Mr. Miller raised his cane and pointed it at the servants in the hall. All of you, be quiet. Don't disturb my son's important business. Half an hour later, the moaning stopped. The fortune teller stamped his foot and shouted, It's done. Open the coffin. Chloe sat up, her clothes in disarray, a look of pure satisfaction on her face. She touched her now glowing cheeks, smiling with a mix of shyness and seduction. Leaning close, she whispered in my ear, Sister, when I kept watch for you in our last life, I don't think Jason was this attentive to you. It seems the birth charts were spot on. This life, I'm going to be 10,000 times better off than you. She patted her stomach, stating with conviction, Don't worry. Once I give birth to the Miller family's first grandson, I'll send a few thousand in silver your way. Consider it compensation for killing you last time. My gaze fell upon Chloe's stomach. A fog cleared, and inside, she was truly pregnant with a baby boy. A ghost child. I glanced at the gloating Chloe and thought to myself, You idiot. Your life is almost over, and you're still showing off. Just then, Mr. Miller slowly approached the coffin, cane in hand. His thoughtful gaze landed on Chloe's flat stomach, and then he burst into a hearty laugh. Our Miller family is blessed with such a fine daughter-in-law. We are truly favored by our ancestors. Chloe, from now on, you are my son's officially wedded wife in this house. Hearing this, Chloe's tail practically shot up to the sky. She cooed sweetly at Mr. Miller, father. I looked at Mr. Miller, his back straight, his face old but with none of an old man's frailty, and a chill ran down my spine. A wolf in sheep's clothing was the perfect way to describe him. He smiled and acted like a kind old man in public, but behind the scenes, he was a ruthless killer. I could never forget the image from my past life. Him smiling faintly as he ordered his men to break my legs and imprison me. That was what gave Chloe the chance to kill me. But Chloe probably has no idea just how formidable her new father-in-law is. Ha 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 ha, rewards. Rewards for everyone. Mr. Miller waved his hand, and a maid brought a platter of silver to me. Mississippi Ava, this is for you. Chloe frowned at the sight, opening her mouth to object, but her eyes darted around, and she changed her tune to a mocking one. Sister, consider this a little gift from our Miller family. Take it and buy yourself some nice makeup and new clothes. Go live a little. Chloe probably thinks I'll be just like her in her last life. Take the money, blow it all, and then sink so low as to become some rich man's mistress. How pathetic. I blinked and smiled faintly. Then I thank you, Mr. Miller. With that, I took the silver, patting Chloe's hand as I did. Sister, I advised, you must take good care of yourself and the baby. The first 3 months are the most dangerous. In my last life, from the moment the coffin was opened after my ghost marriage to Jason, my life was a string of bad luck. I'd either slip and break a bone or catch some illness that left me bedridden. Thinking about it now, I'm almost excited to see which is stronger, Chloe's fate or the ghost child's. After leaving the Miller estate, I used the silver to rent a small spiritual shop. This time, free from the Millers and the ghost marriage, I could finally focus on my own career. For the first couple of days, Chloe would show up daily in brand new luxurious outfits, dripping with jewels, leading a retinue of maids and matrons to show off. She even sent her servants to trash my shop, making a mess of the place I had worked so hard to fix up. But it wasn't long before things started happening to Chloe. First, she choked on bird's nest soup and coughed up blood. Then, while out shopping for new clothes, a brick fell and gashed her head open. At night, she caught a nasty cold while bathing. It got so bad that Chloe was too scared to eat, too scared to leave the house, and too scared to even bathe. In the sweltering July heat, she gave herself a terrible case of heat rash. The Miller servants all snickered behind her back, saying she was a peasant who couldn't handle the good life, that she was so used to hardship she didn't know how to enjoy her fortune. Dr. Lee from the pharmacy next door was practically living at the Miller house. But Chloe was tough for the sake of the golden child in her belly. She endured the pain of her wounds and the high fever from her cold without taking a single drop of medicine. Even Dr. Lee and his wife, Mrs. Lee, were amazed by her fortitude. I enjoyed the peace and quiet, spending my days doing a bit of feng shui consulting and helping with minor hauntings. But late one night, about half a month later, a frantic knocking echoed on my shop door. I groggily put on my shoes and peered through the crack in the door. It was Mrs. Lee, her face pale and her eyes filled with tears. A dark aura swirled around her. A close relative had died. I sensed something was terribly wrong. I quickly unlatched the door. Mrs. Lee, what happened? Her lips trembled as she fell to her knees before me. Ava, please, you have to save my husband. Yes, not going to make it. I scrambled to throw on my clothes and rushed next door. When I pushed open their door, the scene inside froze me to the spot. Dr. Lee, covered in blood, was wrapped in a straw mat. His face was completely drained of color, his mouth wide open, with blood pooling from it. Someone had cut out his tongue and all 10 of his fingers. I reached out to check for a pulse. He was gone. Mrs. Lee threw herself beside him, wailing, "Honey, honey, wake up. You were fine this morning. How could this happen?" Seeing her gut-wrenching grief, my own heart tightened. Dr. and Mrs. Lee were kind people. They had been so warm and welcoming since I moved in, often bringing me food. Not only that, Dr. Lee would sometimes hold free clinics, treating the poor and giving out medicine at no cost. I never imagined he would meet such a horrific end. Mrs. Lee shot to her feet, her eyes bloodshot. The godless, heartless Miller family. I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to avenge my husband. A cold gust of wind blew past, and the hall door creaked open. A faint, chilly presence emanated from behind it. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly turned around. Through my spiritual sight, I saw Dr. Lee's ghost, twisted in agony, as if something were pulling him back. He shook his head frantically, his face a mask of pain, and mouthed, "Don't go. Don't go to the Millers." Then his spirit dissipated into the night. It was as if Mrs. Lee felt it too. Her eyes went vacant as she stared at the swaying door, and she froze in place. "Wait, Mrs. Lee," I said, grabbing her sleeve. "Don't go yet. You're a woman with no strength to fight back. Going for revenge would be like an ant trying to stop a carriage. If something happens to you, what will your son Leo do?" Mrs. Lee stared into the darkness, beating her chest and crying in despair. Dr. Lee's tongue had been cut out. It seemed he must have discovered some secret, which is why he was silenced. But Dr. Lee was just treating Chloe. What could he have found out? Chloe's ghost child? I shook my head. No. The fact that Chloe had conceived a child with Jason in a coffin was already public knowledge. Even if Dr. Lee had noticed something strange about the pregnancy, it wasn't a crime punishable by death. "Mrs. Lee, did Dr. Lee act strangely at all in the last couple of days?" Mrs. Lee snapped back to reality, lost in thought. She shook her head. "He just went to the Miller house every day to see their new daughter-in-law. But since she is pregnant and refuses all medicine, there wasn't much for him to do." "Wait." Mrs. Lee clapped her hands, frowning. "My husband, for the last 2 nights, he got up in the middle of the night and spent a long time in the pharmacy by himself. And in the mornings he would take a large bag of herbs to the Miller house. Chloe wasn't taking any medicine, so was it Mr. Miller who was sick?" I muttered to myself, but immediately dismissed the idea. From what I knew in my past life, Mr. Miller was in excellent health. He was nearly 70 but had the constitution of a young man, never getting sick or needing medicine. Back then, I even suspected that it wasn't Jason who had died, but Mr. Miller himself. "Mrs. Lee, do you know what those herbs Dr. Lee took were for?" "I'll go check." "My husband always kept a copy of his prescriptions," Mrs. Lee said, wiping away a tear before hurrying to the pharmacy. "It's an abortifacient." "An abortifacient?" My heart sank. Chloe was so determined to protect that ghost child that she wouldn't even take medicine for a fever. There's no way she would try to induce an abortion herself. And in that entire Miller estate, the only person who would dare to harm Chloe was. Thinking back to the day of the ghost marriage in my past life, I already had a good guess. "Chloe, oh Chloe, you could have never imagined this, could you? In your last life, you dodged a bullet through your own selfish cowardice, managing to survive. You should have been grateful. But you weren't content. You wished so desperately for a second chance, only to walk right into a series of death traps." I gave Mrs. Lee a few words of comfort and hurried home. The next day, I set up a wish fulfillment box in front of my shop with great fanfare, specifically to help the living fulfill the last wishes of their deceased relatives. It was market day, and within half an hour, a large crowd had gathered. "Young lady, you're so young to be opening a spiritual shop and claiming to fulfill wishes. Are you just trying to scam some pocket money?" "Yeah, she looks like she is barely a teenager." I ignored them, simply counting the minutes, waiting for Chloe. I knew she would come. Knowing her as I did, she would never let me have a good life this time around. Instead, she'd want to grind me into the dust. Seeing a lavishly dressed figure hurrying down the street, I cleared my throat lightly. "My wish-fulfilling service is free. If you don't believe me, there's no harm in trying." As expected, Chloe's voice cut through the crowd before the words were even out of my mouth. What a pathetic little con artist. It had only been a couple of weeks since I'd last seen Chloe, but she looked like a completely different person. Even the thick layer of makeup couldn't hide the deep exhaustion on her face. Her once plump cheeks were now gaunt and withered, as if all the life had been sucked out of them. Her eyes were sunken, and a thick bandage was wrapped around her forehead. A round, protruding belly sat awkwardly on her emaciated frame. It had been less than a month since the ghost's marriage, but Chloe's stomach looked like a normal woman's at 5 months pregnant. It seemed the ghost child had been draining plenty of her life force. I let my gaze sweep over her for a second before turning my attention to others. I knew Chloe must be furious right now. She thought that in this new life, she was the high and mighty daughter-in-law of the Miller family, while I was just a pathetic wretch on the street waiting for her charity. She couldn't stand being ignored. She reached out and viciously pinched the arm of the maid beside her. The maid shrieked in pain. Ah. Chloe shot the maid a look, and the maid got the message. She pointed at me and challenged. You say you can fulfill wishes? Then look at me. I want to see my dead father, and ask him how he is doing in the afterlife. By touching a living person's hands and closing my eyes, I could use my sight to see their deceased relatives. I reached out and took the maid's hand. After a moment, I spoke calmly. She doesn't have a father. Chloe burst out laughing, her voice shrill. Hey everyone, come and see. She says my maid doesn't have a father. Who in the world doesn't have a father? Did she pop out of a rock? The onlookers started to grumble indignantly. She is a fraud. Turn her over to the authorities. So young, but so deceitful. Smash her sign. But some people who I had helped with spiritual matters spoke up for me. Ava's readings are quite accurate. My house was unsettled after my father passed, and she helped me. That's right. My daughter-in-law died in childbirth, and I went to her. She didn't charge me a penny. And she said my daughter-in-law was worried about her elderly mother. After we made sure her mother was taken care of, everything was fine. I smiled faintly and patted the maid's rough hands. Young lady, you've had a hard life. If you've never met a deceased relative, even the sight can't establish a connection. The maid stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, and then slowly lowered her head. An sharp-eyed old woman in the crowd recognized her. Oh. Isn't that Lucy from the Miller household? It's true, she doesn't have a father. Her father ran off when her mother was pregnant, which is why they had to sell her to the Millers. Well, that Ava girl is really something. A murmur of amazement went through the crowd. Chloe ground her teeth in frustration, her eyes locked on me. Don't let her fool you. She is the one who tried everything she could to crawl into my man's bed. Chloe kicked the maid in the shin. You useless servant, tell them. Isn't it true? The maid buckled in pain. Someone in the crowd spoke up. Hey, servants are people too. You can't just beat and curse them for no reason. She looks so frail, but her hands are so cruel. What a black heart. Someone else in the crowd whispered back. Haven't you heard? That's the one from the Miller family, the one who insisted on marrying a dead man. She was a nobody, and now that she has hit the jackpot, she is insufferable. And saying Ava wanted to climb into her man's bed? That's hilarious. Who in their right mind would marry a corpse? Is that true? So that's her? I heard on the day of the ghost marriage, she was hugging and kissing the dead body. No wonder she is so vile. In my last life, after the ghost marriage, I was the subject of endless gossip. Now, it's your turn to feel what it's like to have fingers pointed at you. Chloe's face twisted into a grotesque mask, making her gaunt features even more terrifying. So what if he is dead? She roared. He is still my man. She patted her belly proudly. When I give birth to the Miller family's first grandson, I'll be the most respected person in this household. And when that old man kicks the bucket, the entire Miller fortune will be mine. Ha ha ha. As soon as she said it, the people around her started whispering and pointing. Things seemed to be progressing even more smoothly than I had imagined. It looked like the poverty and resentment from her past life had driven my dear sister to the brink of madness. Knowing Mr. Miller, a staunchly patriarchal and feudal head of the family who valued money above all else and tolerated no challenge to his authority, I wondered what kind of trouble Chloe's words would stir up when they reached his ears. But this wasn't enough. I wanted them to tear each other apart. What's all this commotion? What's going on here? Mrs. Lee appeared right on cue, holding her son Leo, craning her neck to see Chloe and me. Before anyone could answer, little Leo in her arms pointed at Chloe's belly and burst into tears. Ghost. There's a ghost in her belly. Leo's crying instantly drew everyone's attention. All eyes turned to Chloe's stomach with strange looks. Chloe clutched her belly tightly, looking around defensively. What do you want? This is Jason's and my child. Leo struggled, clinging to his mother's neck, trembling. Mommy, I'm scared. I've heard some young children can see unusual things. Could that belly really be holding a ghost child? Didn't you all hear? The Miller's new bride conceived this baby in a coffin with her dead husband. How can a living person, with a dead person? What else could it be but a ghost? Could it be a vengeful spirit coming to the Miller family for revenge? The crowd buzzed with speculation. Chloe's face went white, her eyes bloodshot. She covered her ears and screamed, "Ah!" She grabbed a nearby table and chairs and started throwing them at the crowd. Nonsense! This is a blessing from my Jason. This is a joyous event for the Miller family. I am the family's greatest benefactor. Leo cried even louder. Mommy. She's possessed by a ghost. Wah, she's going to kill someone. The onlookers, terrified, scattered in a panic. The once crowded street was empty in an instant. Chloe grabbed me by the collar and screamed, "It was you, Ava. You did this on purpose. You're jealous that my life is better than yours. You're trying to harm my child. I'm telling you, it's impossible. I will bring him into this world, and I will be the most respected woman in the Miller family, and you will be nothing but a worthless dog at my feet." I let out a cold, soft laugh, saying nothing. You're wrong, Chloe. Not only will I not harm him, I actually hope you give birth to him. Otherwise, how would you ever know just how powerful a ghost child's resentment can be? Ma'am, we should be getting home. The master said you've been out too long, and it's time for your pregnancy protection medicine. The Miller family's old butler had appeared behind Chloe at some point, reminding her softly. Chloe finally came to her senses. She straightened her clothes, her face full of pride, as if showing off how much Mr. Miller cared about the child in her belly. I just leaned in close to her ear and whispered, in a voice only she could hear, "Sister, how do you know if you're drinking medicine to protect the pregnancy, or to end it?" Chloe's pupils contracted, her fists clenching. But I ignored her and walked straight home. Chloe had pinned all her hopes for the future on the baby in her belly. I just needed to plant a seed of doubt, and it would grow into a towering tree of suspicion in her mind. Before I even reached my door, I heard Chloe's scream from behind me. Oh, I almost forgot. She was still absorbing the Miller family's bad luck. I turned back to see that a collapsed wall had crushed Chloe's lower leg. From the look of it, it was a fracture at the very least. Looks like I'll have some peace and quiet for a while. After Chloe left, I found some street urchins and paid them to keep an eye on her. I gave them a few more silver coins, and they happily ran off towards the Miller estate. It didn't even take 2 days for Chloe to break. Under the cover of darkness, she hobbled out the back gate of the Miller house with a cane and a bundle, limping into the night. After a few detours, she stopped outside a pharmacy. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Lee had already made arrangements with every pharmacy in town. It didn't matter if Chloe brought in an abortifacient or a pregnancy tonic, the result would be the same. The little beggar mimicked Chloe's limp with glee, clutching his stomach and laughing. That lady must be cursed. A dog chased and bit her on her way out, and on her way back, she stepped in dog poop and fell flat on her face. Ha ha ha, it was hilarious. A small smile played on my lips. It seemed Chloe had her answer. I was suddenly curious how Chloe's mind, which had remained dull through 2 lifetimes, would handle this. How would she protect the ghost child in her womb from Mr. Miller? Clearly, an idiot sent back in time doesn't get any smarter. It's a rebirth, not a brain transplant. I guess that out of 1,000 possible methods, Chloe would choose the stupidest one. Something big was happening at the Miller estate recently. Everyone was saying Mr. Miller was preparing for his final days, and was trying to accumulate good karma. Not only did he give all his servants a long leave to visit their families, providing them with travel money, but he also sponsored a large festival at the temple on the edge of town. The whole main street was buzzing as everyone flocked to it. But you can't wash coal and turn it into white jade. How could a bad person suddenly turn good? While the temple festival was in full swing, a fire broke out at the Miller residence. In the dry heat of August, a tiny spark could instantly become a raging inferno. I sat at home, watching the thick black smoke billow up from the direction of the Miller estate. I quickly got up. Strangely enough, the fire was burning most fiercely in the courtyard where Chloe lived, the same place I had lived in my past life. By the time I arrived, Mr. Miller was sitting wearily outside the gates of the estate, staring at the thick smoke and muttering to himself, "It's hopeless, it's hopeless." When he saw me approach, he scrambled to his feet. "Mississippi Ava, quick, you have to save Chloe. She's inside sleeping." I don't know how the fire from the woodshed spread here. What are we going to do? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have let the servants go home. If anything happens to Chloe, how will I face Jason in the afterlife? Mr. Miller paced back and forth, wiping the sweat from his brow with his sleeve. If I hadn't dealt with him day in and day out in my past life, I might have actually believed how worried he was about Chloe. Neighbors who saw the fire, aside from those at the temple festival, had all run over to help. It seemed Chloe had lost this battle, completely and utterly. I shook my head. I thought she would have held on for a few more days. But this was fine too. It was time for Mr. Miller to suffer a little. I turned my back to the crowd and said softly, Mr. Miller, if Chloe knew you went to such great lengths to harm her, she would probably hate you, don't you think? Mr. Miller froze, his eyes sizing me up with an undisguised scrutiny. What are you talking about? I curved my lips into a faint smile, mimicking the one Mr. Miller used to wear in my past life. Why do you think the child in Chloe's belly couldn't be aborted, no matter how much medicine she took? In fact, why did it just grow faster and faster? Mr. Miller pointed at me, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions, but all I could see reflected in his eyes was the raging fire. More and more people arrived to help fight the fire at the Miller estate. The flames gradually began to subside. Suddenly, someone in the crowd screamed, "She's still alive." But the joy quickly turned to terror. Ah, a ghost. Chloe, engulfed in flames, dragged herself out of the fire, her hands propping up her body. The expensive fabric of her clothes had been burned to ash, sticking to her ulcerated skin. Her eyes were fixed on Mr. Miller, as if she wanted to devour him whole. Her belly was now swollen like a taut balloon, with only a thin layer of skin covering a writhing infant, looking as if it would burst out at any second. The ghost child had fully formed. The ghost child in Chloe's womb had taken less than a month to mature. The stronger the resentment, the faster a ghost child develops. The bowls of abortifacient that Mr. Miller had fed her might have worked on a human fetus, but for a ghost child, they only solidified into hatred and fueled its growth with complaint or resentment energy. On the day of the ghost's marriage, the ghost child must have chosen Chloe's body because of the resentment she carried from her rebirth. Chloe crawled out of the mansion, dragging a trail of blood behind her. She clutched her stomach, screaming in agony, "I'm giving birth! I'm giving birth! This is the Miller family's grandson. All this immense wealth belongs to us now." Dark red blood began to seep from between Chloe's legs. As the blood flowed, her swollen belly slowly deflated, and the blood on the ground coagulated into the shape of a half-grown infant. But the infant was deathly pale, with black fingernails, and it was growing at an alarming rate. The onlookers dropped their water buckets and scattered in terror. Chloe broke into a crazed laugh, scooping up the infant. Look everyone. This is the future head of the Miller family. You see, he's my and Jason's child. He looks exactly like Jason." I looked closely. He didn't just look like Jason, this was Jason. I could never be mistaken. In my last life, Jason's portrait hung in the Miller Ancestral Hall. I made offerings to it every month. I would never be wrong. Although I knew from the beginning that Chloe was carrying a ghost child that fed on human resentment, I never imagined that the ghost child would turn out to be Jason himself. As I was thinking, the infant had already grown to the height of an adult man. No, Mr. Miller's trembling voice came from behind me. He stared in disbelief at the man walking stiffly towards him, his expression shifting from surprise to fear, and finally to terror. "How can you be alive? You're already..." Mr. Miller muttered to himself, trying to run but collapsing heavily to the ground. "I'm already what?" Jason pressed forward, grabbing Mr. Miller by the neck and lifting him up. Mr. Miller flailed his hands, struggling to breathe. "Tell me, what have I already become? That I've already been killed by you? Is that it?" Jason's eyes widened, his grip tightening with ferocious strength. Mr. Miller's face turned ashen. He opened his purple lips. "You unfilial son." Jason let out a loud ha, and threw his head back to laugh. He released his grip, dropping Mr. Miller heavily to the ground. His face was a mask of accusation. "Unfilial? How should I have been filial to you? By handing over my life to you on a silver platter? So you could use me to ward off your disasters? As he spoke, a deep sorrow welled up in Jason's eyes. Did you have to kill everyone around you? It wasn't enough for you to use my mother as a shield. You had to use me too, and even get me a spirit bride to take on your curse. You're the one who deserves to die. So Jason didn't die of natural causes. And I wasn't the first person Mr. Miller used as a scapegoat. To think there was a man in this world who would sacrifice his own wife and son for his own sake. I sighed, a wave of sorrow washing over me. While Jason was lost in his grief, Mr. Miller seized the opportunity to get up and make a mad dash to escape. The last trace of pity vanished from Jason's eyes. He lunged at Mr. Miller's back, his black nails growing wildly, and plunged them straight through Mr. Miller's body from behind. Ugh! Mr. Miller spat out a mouthful of blood, turning to stare in disbelief. Jason looked vacantly at the heart in his hand, muttering to himself, "You don't deserve to have this. You never had a heart to begin with." Chloe watched with glee as Mr. Miller's body collapsed, shouting, "Good riddance! Good riddance! He deserved it! He deserved it!" Then her eyes landed on me, and a glint appeared. "And her. Good boy, kill that woman. Once you kill her, this entire Miller fortune will belong to us." I looked up and met Jason's deep eyes. In our past life, though we were husband and wife in a ghost marriage, I had only ever seen him in his portrait. I felt resentment towards him, but I couldn't quite place why. I had blamed him for all the misfortunes I suffered, but in the end he was just a dead man. When Jason saw me clearly, he seemed to lose focus for a moment. "It's you." I was taken aback. He recognized me? Jason's thoughts seemed to drift far away. He opened his mouth. "The woman who burned the incense." Before I could answer, he crushed the bloody organ in his hand. A look of finality flashed in his eyes, and his body disintegrated into dust, vanishing into the night. The resentment that clung to him dissipated along with him. Chloe panicked, scrambling and crawling towards me, grabbing wildly at the empty air. "My good boy. Where's my good boy? You're the Miller family's eldest grandson. You were supposed to inherit a massive fortune." Chloe screamed madly. Her skin, ravaged by the fire, was ulcerated, and her hair was singed. Her original features were completely unrecognizable. "It was you. It must have been you." Chloe pointed at me viciously, the venom in her eyes practically overflowing. "Where did you hide my son? Give him back to me. Ava, even in this new life, you still have to steal what's mine." I looked at the disfigured woman before me and spoke calmly. "Chloe, I never wanted to steal anything from you. It was all because of your own greed and your own malice. In our last life, if you weren't so greedy yet so unwilling to sacrifice yourself, why would you have chosen to drug me and send me to that ghost marriage? Did you think my status as a wish-granter last time was because I got lucky with the Miller family? You're wrong. I was born with this gift. It just awakened when I came of age. You've wanted to be better than me for 2 lifetimes, haven't you? Well, I'm telling you today, it's impossible. You will never be better than me, because from birth, you were never my equal. Chloe, if you hadn't harbored such wicked intentions in our last life, throwing me into that living hell of the Miller house, I would have had a much better life than the one you saw." Chloe's lips trembled, and she shook her head frantically. "Impossible. Impossible. It's because you stole my things. You stole my life. Ava, you're a monster." I scoffed. "Chloe, didn't you already make your choice in this life? Weren't you the one who married Jason in the ghost marriage? Haven't you noticed that you started having bad luck right after? Oh, and you just heard it, didn't you? The spirit bride is just a scapegoat for the Miller family's disasters. Did you think it was some supreme honor bestowed upon you? What are you so proud of? The son in your belly?" I clicked my tongue twice, my voice dripping with disdain. "Chloe, that was just a ghost child that fed on the resentment of the living. I knew it from the day the coffin was opened after the wedding. Why else do you think I provoked you? Because the more you resented everyone, the faster that ghost child grew. That way, I could watch you all tear each other apart. Ha 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 ha, my foolish little sister." Chloe completely lost it, clawing at her ruined face with her nails. She let out a frenzied roar, grabbing a burning plank from nearby and swinging it at me. "Ava, I'm going to kill you. Kill me so you can be reborn again? Sorry, but this time, it's not up to you. I kicked the plank out of Chloe's hand. Losing control, she looked around frantically for another weapon. Her eyes lit up as they landed on a thick, half-burned pillar of the mansion. She rushed into the flames, grabbing the pillar and trying to drag it out. But the house, having burned for so long, was already unstable. It collapsed with a deafening roar, burying her in fire and dust. Chloe died in the same courtyard where she had killed me in our last life. Everything here had a beginning and an end. The end.